Так отут стояли.
Туди так. Перші дні, коли ми повернулися після звільнення, тут ще люди були, загиблі люди були просто, вони були на дорогах, під парканами.
Я знаю, что одних они электрошоком, шокером пытали.
This is a story about cruelty and violence by Russian forces against Ukrainian civilians.
Which floor were you on?
11th floor.
Oh my God.
Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, my colleagues and I have documented the killing of civilians and damage to homes, schools, and hospitals.
Reports of dozens of bodies found in the rubble here in Bordyanka.
Were there any military targets Ukrainian forces?
Нічого. Нічого вообще.
Розруха повинна бути відшкодована за рахунок тих, хто розпочав цю війну.
For about a month, Russian forces occupied parts of northern Ukraine as they tried to take the capital. But since they've withdrawn and moved south and to the east, more and more evidence is emerging of the brutality with which they treated civilians in these areas.
Right now we're headed up to Bucha, which is just northwest of the capital of Kyiv, and it was under Russian occupation from the early days of Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Parts, I'm sure.
Mostly everyone, I think, who stayed here, and mostly everyone lose maybe somebody or something.
God, this whole building's just torn in half, huh?
Yes, just bombing.
Human Rights Watch arrived in Bucha just 4 days after Russian forces left the area.
The streets of Bucha are littered with evidence of violations and apparent war crimes. Civilians have been killed on street after street, and it seems like around every corner there's more.
We saw bodies with their hands tied behind their backs, indicating that they were executed. Bodies were found in a mass grave beside this church, where town officials had buried people after the morgue had filled up. Funeral home workers told us that the bodies showed signs of torture. Among them were women and children. In Bucha and 17 other cities and towns that were formerly occupied, Human Rights Watch interviewed more than 100 people and heard evidence of serious abuse against civilians.
There was one large attack on this city that killed at least 47 people on a residential quarter. At the time, a few weeks ago, we were able to document that incident remotely, but now we can finally see for ourselves and further verify all of the details about this incident.
Okay.
But something was hit in the middle of that building.
Yes, as well.
Yeah, there was a lot of destruction here. A lot of destruction. So this area was clearly heavily affected by incoming munitions. Here's one crater we see. We saw two large craters over there, a smaller one on the other side. We're trying to find residents of these buildings who were here at the time that the attacks occurred.
Буквально кілька деталей уточнити, що сталося, от коли вони налетіли.
А я була якраз у
She
сховищі.
was in the basement. Door is
І
wooden.
стояв хлопець,
And the boy was
сусід,
standing, the neighboring
і каже,
boy
щось
was
летить,
I'm
і
calling my
все.
husband. There is
Потім
no network.
темнота,
The darkness.
іскри,
З очей, тобто ви
Да.
от
І,
такі...
і така шапка злетіла.
Коли це сталося, більшість людей, вони все ж таки були і жили у себе в будинках чи
Так,
роз'їхалися?
так.
Yes, they were
Так.
in the houses.
So they were right here in the basement.
Yes, they were there. Yeah.
Шапка злетіла.
Oh, that's
Тут ось.
why they had away from
Do you have any sense of why these attacks targeted this area? Were there any military targets, Ukrainian forces, soldiers, vehicles in this area?
Нічого.
nothing.
Нічого вообще. Аптека,
The pharmacy,
жилий
the
масив,
residential
нема нічого. Тут
building,
вообще воєнних не було.
No military structure.
Вообще нема нічого.
No, nothing.
Russian forces have used explosive weapons indiscriminately in populated areas throughout this conflict. Just outside of Chernihiv, we saw evidence of a cluster munition, an inaccurate, unreliable weapon that's banned by most countries. In the latest fighting, Russian forces have used at least 6 different types of cluster munitions, killing hundreds of civilians. Ukrainian forces also appear to have used cluster munitions, at least once.
So we are in Kiev. We just got a lead that there is a man who has survived captivity by Russians.
Igor is a hairdresser from Kiev. He fled with his family to Bogdany village when the conflict started. But Russian soldiers went door to door in the town and he was detained. They brought him to the city of Dimir, where he was held with 49 other people.
Я знаю, что одних они шокером пытали.
Откуда вы это знаете? Вы видели?
Приходили.
И сколько таких было?
Такое я слышал с первого дня до последнего, потому что
Across occupied areas, people like Ihor were rounded up and held in deplorable conditions. Often their families had no idea where they were or if they were alive. In Yehidne, Russian forces held more than 350 people, including more than 70 children, in this school basement for almost a month. 10 people died, their names etched here on the wall.
I just interviewed a 66-year-old guy, a resident of Novobikiv, who was detained, rounded up together with other civilians by Russian soldiers during their control of the territory. And he was detained in this building. He's so scared that he does not want to be on camera, does not want his name to be used. Let's go inside and I can show you where they were held. In this small boiler room, there were 20 people held at some point. Some of them spent their weeks. I don't know how to call it, a dugout, a pit. This is where 7 people were kept. Dark, cold. For 7 days he spent here. He was taken to toilet only 3 times. He had no food at all. According to him, a Russian soldier came in to say that he had an order to execute 8 of them, made 8 people count 1 to 8 and took them out. The next day when he was released, he found 2 of them dead, their heads smashed in the cemetery a few meters away. The third one was also discovered dead later. The fate of the 5 is unknown.
Nearby, Russian forces left graffiti. It likely refers to Russian license plate numbers, indicating where soldiers or military vehicles came from. This could become evidence against the people responsible for crimes committed here.
Є сліди на заборі. Тут
Yuri and his friend Ivan were in a car with the town mayor going to pick up medical supplies when Russian soldiers shot at them. Yuri showed us where this happened.
З моста. Ну, не з моста, а з дороги. То Свято-Покровська вулиця, дамба, стрільба велась оттуда. Звідти. Коли ми з першої черги нас вела стрільба автоматичного вогонь, і зразу вже був поранений Іван Заря. Стрільба велась прямо на пораження, на пораження водія, на пораження пасажирів. Тому що перша пуля зразу вже попала в голову пасажира, який сидів ззаді, за водієм. Це був Іван. Я сидів звідси, витягнув Івана. І ми почали рухати. В цей час по нам звідти почали вести автоматичний вогонь. І ще раз, автомобіль, приклад, от там. Автоматичний вогонь вівся доволі таки інтенсивний і витягнули от місце, де загинув Іван Заря.
The pattern of abuse we are seeing in Ukraine is consistent with well-documented grave crimes by Russian forces in other places, such as Syria. The lack of accountability for those violations has regrettably opened the door for what is occurring today. In all of our research, what we hear again and again is that the victims of these violations want justice.
Але оці розруха повинна бути відшкодована за рахунок тих, хто розпочав цю війну.